Hello and welcome back to my channel, A Transformed Life with Tiffani Cappello. And in my last video, I spoke with you about things you absolutely must do if you want to overcome your anxiety. And if you remember, I talked about identifying those root causes, those thinking patterns, the things that haven't healed, the beliefs in your subconscious mind that are fueling your anxiety. And today we are going to speak specifically about something called cognitive distortions. And as I talk in this video today, I really want you to be thinking about each cognitive distortion I talk about. A cognitive distortion is a thinking pattern. It's a way of viewing the world in which you are creating anxiety in your mind because it's basically you're thinking things that aren't true. It's a mental exaggeration. Now, remember, as I talk about these cognitive distortions, it's easy for you to get overwhelmed and think, check, check, check. Oh my God, I have every one of these. I can tell you at one time, I would have had every one of these cognitive distortions. So don't get discouraged, because that's why this channel is here, to help you to shift these things. And I'm going to be creating a meditation to literally reprogram your subconscious mind away from these cognitive distortions. I'll be posting it here on YouTube to help you. So don't be discouraged. That's why we're here. If we're not facing what's going on in our minds, we're not going to be able to shift it. And as overwhelming as it can be, I can promise you that no matter how many of these cognitive distortions you're currently struggling with, you can literally reprogram your mind. What was programmed in back there in your past can be programmed out. And I'm just walking proof as someone who has had very severe anxiety and now lives in peace and confidence that you can do it too. I'm not special, okay? You can do this too. So we're going to talk about these cognitive distortions, and you might need to pause this video after each one and really think about it. Maybe get out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and write down the ones you're struggling with, okay? And these are the ones you're going to want to focus on reframing. And it's really helpful to go through these distortions because you'll begin to notice them. So there's one in particular that I really struggled with, and it was the last one to go in my struggle, to refine my thinking to a pattern of thinking that was empowering. Now, I won't sit here and pretend I don't ever fall into these, okay? Perfectionism is the death knell of peace of mind. And if you've been watching my videos, you know I have given up on perfectionism, or at least I've tried, okay? My videos aren't perfect. I might make a mistake. I might scratch my nose. I do have notes behind me that you're going to see me look up at once in a while. But I think the most important thing is not that we're perfect. The most important thing is that I'm conveying to you a path towards understanding your anxiety so that you can get better, so that you can recover. Okay, and I think it probably doesn't bother you that I might not look perfect or speak perfect all the time. And I can assure you that when you are on this journey of recovery, you're not going to be perfect. And you're never going to get to that place where you can look at an entire month of your life and say, oh, didn't give in to any of these cognitive distortions. We're human. Okay, we're never going to be perfect, and it's okay. So please, your forewarning, as I start to go through this list, please do not get discouraged. I'm sure I've fallen into the pattern of this even in the last month. They just don't dominate my life anymore, and they don't have to dominate yours. So the first cognitive distortion we're going to talk about today is black and white thinking, or as it's also termed, all or nothing thinking. This means you look at something as 100% right or 100% wrong. I see this as a really huge problem nowadays, and we're actually being pushed in our culture and society to adopt some of these cognitive distortions as a way of life, okay, as a way of thinking. A lot of social media is pushing cognitive distortions. A lot of even the news is pushing cognitive distortions. So an example, all men are only out for one thing. 100%. Men are either good or men are either bad. There can be nothing within that continuum between the two extremes, okay? Another one, this is what I see out there, particularly before the last election. All people who disagree with me politically, all people in that political party over there, they're bad. They're bad people. They're deceived. They're warped. They're name that we call people that we disagree with. Okay, black and white thinking. There can't be any good people in that religion, that group. Okay, this is a dangerous cognitive distortion, and we miss out on truth and connection, and we create a lot of misery in our life when we believe that cognitive distortion. So, number 2, overgeneralization. Okay, this is when you develop broad negative conclusions, okay, because things aren't that cut and dry. I'm going to give you an example. Okay, I failed an exam, so therefore I'm going to fail at everything. Okay, or he always lies. Okay, using the word always or never is a hint that you've fallen into the cognitive distortion of overgeneralization. No one always lies, okay? Or I never do well in social situations. I always mess things up. And that's as if you can't find any contrary evidence that you actually do well in some social situations, or you do a really good job on some things, okay? And you can see how this would create anxiety in your life. Number 3, mental filtering, okay? This is when you're focused exclusively on the negative aspects of something, okay? So you might say things to yourself like, well, my wife and I are having a problem, so my marriage is bad. Or, you know, I gave that presentation and I forgot to mention that really important key point. My whole presentation was just so bad, okay? Or, well, you know, men just don't find me attractive because, you know, my last partner, he thought I needed to lose weight. He said he wasn't attracted to me anymore. So you can see how these statements that we make within our mind create anxiety, create discontent within us. There's no way that all men don't find you attractive because your last partner didn't. It doesn't make your entire presentation bad because you forgot that one key point, okay? And the fact that you might be having a problem within your marriage doesn't mean every aspect of your marriage is bad. But when we're mentally filtering, we're literally focusing on the negative aspects of everything we're looking at. Now, the next cognitive distortion I want to talk about is sort of the opposite of mental filtering. It's called discounting the positive. So you receive a compliment or you do something well, and somehow you manage to degrade that moment and to convince yourself, well, this must be the exception to the rule. Okay, so you're minimizing any positive event or interaction that you're having. So you might say something like, well, you know, someone gives you a compliment, you say, well, they were just being nice. That's obvious. You know, it's obvious they're just being nice because I'm not really that smart. Yeah, so you're minimizing these nice compliments toward yourself. Or you might say, well, you know, I only made the team because they felt sorry for me. So you minimize the other reasons you may have been asked to join that team. And the next cognitive distortion we're going to talk about is catastrophizing. That's when you are assuming the absolute worst. And I see this so much in clients, and it's something I used to be really guilty for. Okay, really guilty. I did this all the time. And you could see where something like this, or even the other cognitive distortions, can get entrenched in the mind based on stuff that has happened in the past. If you had a difficult childhood and things were always going wrong in your family, you could see why it would be easy for your brain to jump to the conclusion that something bad is always happening, something negative is coming down the pike, and then your brain begins to point out circumstances and situations and show you the worst case scenario. Remember, our brain is always trying to protect us. That's the purpose of the anxiety. But that doesn't mean that that protection applies to our lives today. It may have been great back then when your childhood was dangerous, and now today you're in a peaceful situation, a safe situation, and your brain is still reacting. So please don't blame yourself if you're catastrophizing. It can all be reprogrammed. That first step is awareness. So what is catastrophizing? So it's assuming the worst. So you might say something like, okay, I made a mistake today at work. I'm definitely going to be fired. I know I'm going to be fired. And you begin to fantasize about this worst case scenario. You imagine that you're going to be fired. You're probably going to be homeless. You might lose your home. And you continue to spiral down. You could see why that might lead to depression, right? A lot of depression is just because of the anxiety that we're dealing with and the way we're thinking around that anxiety. Okay, we might say, oh my God, it's this terrible headache. I probably have a brain tumor. And then you're looking on the internet, you're reading articles about people with brain tumors who get headaches, and you're assuming I must have a brain tumor. Yes, I think I have all these symptoms, okay? Or you say, well, I text Bob this morning, and it's now 11 o'clock. He still hasn't texted me back. He's definitely mad at me. He's going to break up with me. It's the end of my relationship. I'm going to live alone. I'm going to die alone. You see how this can spiral? So catastrophizing is the one cognitive distortion that can really lead you into a deep depression. And it's one of the cognitive distortions that create a severe level of anxiety if you continue to spiral into worse and worse catastrophizing. But like I said, all of that can be reprogrammed. You're not stuck in any of these cognitive distortions. So number 6, the next one is personalization. You're making everything about you. You're taking responsibility for things that actually aren't your responsibility. You're blaming yourself, or you're assuming everything is your fault. So you're in a group or a crowd, everyone's laughing, and you think, oh, it must be me. They're all laughing at me. I know. They could be laughing about something that has nothing to do with you, but you just assume that you've done something wrong, okay? Or you're in a relationship and your partner's irritable, and you think to yourself, oh, he's really irritable. I must have done something wrong. It has to be my fault. What did I do? Or your child is struggling, and you think, yeah, it's because I'm a bad parent. I know it's because I'm a bad parent, okay? So you're making it about you when it actually might have nothing to do with you, okay? Number 7 is labeling, okay? This is when you assign harsh labels to situations, circumstances, but mostly people, okay? You say to yourself, I am a terrible parent. You made a mistake. But you don't say I'm a parent that needs to work on something. You say I am just a horrible, terrible parent, okay? Or you maybe forget your friend's birthday. You don't say, wow, I need to get better at remembering birthdays. Maybe I need to set up some reminders in my calendar. No, you say, I'm a really bad friend. I'm a terrible friend. I'm a horrible friend. You're labeling yourself with a restrictive identity that actually will become predictive of future behavior if you adopt that and believe that in your subconscious mind. Another thing is you might say, Betty, she is such a control freak, okay? Because you watched her control a situation at work or attempt to, okay? A lot of times these harsh labels are really unfair when we place them against ourselves, against other people. We label them, and it's difficult to rise out of a label once it's been stamped on your head or on someone else's head if you begin to view them through the lens of that label, okay? So next, and this is one I really see a lot with people who struggle with anxiety, is emotional reasoning, okay? So my emotions, it's the belief that my emotions always reflect reality. So if I feel guilty, then I must have done something wrong. If I feel angry, then you must have done something wrong. If I feel embarrassed, then obviously I must have done something stupid, okay? So you begin to view life through the lens of your emotions as if your emotions determine reality. So if you feel hopeless, then you might think, well, okay, I feel hopeless about the situation. So that's proof that absolutely nothing can be done. There's no way out. There's no solution. I'm too weak to figure this out. And another one, if I feel offended, then that person must have done or said something to hurt me. It must have been deliberate. It must have been on purpose. Okay. But remember, in other videos, I've talked about triggers. And a lot of times when we have these strong emotional reactions, it's not because that emotion depicts the reality. A lot of times that emotion is coming from other things that have happened in the past. And one of the clearest ways to note when you're actually being triggered is if you look back on a situation or circumstance and you think to yourself, wow, okay, so I reacted so disproportionate to what actually happened. I don't know why I did that. Why did I get so angry? And you look back and you think it was kind of dumb that I got angry like that. Usually you've been triggered, okay? You weren't just angry about the situation, you were angry about how that situation resembled something that happened back here, okay? So some people are recognizing their triggers, and that's important. If you recognize your triggers, be proud of yourself because it's not easy, okay? But a lot of people can live in a state of complete emotional reasoning where they're not recognizing that they're being triggered and they're assuming that their emotions always reflect reality. All right, so continuing on with these cognitive distortions, now we're going to talk about should statements, which is number 9 on our list. And you might have heard the expression, stop shoulding all over yourself. That's when we basically continually criticize ourselves for all the stuff we should be doing that we feel like we're not doing. And because we're not doing it, we feel like we're either a failure or somehow inadequate. So if you're shoulding all over yourself, you might say things to yourself like, oh, I should have gotten my degree by now. That's one I hear a lot with young people. I should have done more. I should be more by now. And you're putting a lot of time pressure on yourself. Instead of seeing life as a journey, you're seeing life as if there are these rigid standards, getting all tongue-tied, of what you should accomplish by what time. Okay. Or you might say, this is another one I hear a lot, I shouldn't be struggling like this. Okay. Or I should be over this by now. I hear that a lot with grieving people. There's no timetable for what you should and should not be. Okay. Now, the next cognitive distortion, number 10, is fortune telling. This is when you're literally predicting a future that you can't possibly know. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if we were predicting good things for our future. We were having emotions that were positive, but we're not doing that with this cognitive distortion. We're predicting disaster. We're predicting negative things in our future. So you're saying things to yourself like, my husband is late. He's probably having an affair. You're saying things like, I know that this upcoming interview, it's going to be a disaster. So you're making these assumptions without any evidence that this is going to actually occur. Sometimes people make those assumptions based on stuff that happened in the past, but just because something happened in the past doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to happen in the future. Or you might say something like this about someone else. You know what, Bob, he's definitely going to screw this up, okay? Because you've developed this expectation. Cognitive distortion number 11, mind reading. This is assuming you know what someone else is thinking. Now, interestingly, this was a huge one for me because for some reason I developed this negative habit of just assuming that someone was thinking bad or negative about me. Now, it probably had something to do with the fact that when I was young, I was bullied. So when you think about it, it makes sense that if you're bullied a lot, you're going to think that other people pose a danger to you, or maybe they're thinking negative things about you. But when you have this habit of mind reading others, you're saying things to yourself like, gosh, you know, Betty didn't say hi to me. I think she must be mad at me. Or he's being really quiet. He must think I'm boring. Or perhaps you're on a date and you say, oh, he's looking at his phone. He must not be interested in me. Okay. The next cognitive distortion, blaming. This is when everything is everyone else's fault. You're not taking personal responsibility for the aspects of your life, your personality, your situation that you do have control over. Obviously, this can be taken to extremes, and people can do this to themselves by blaming themselves. And remember back, that's called personalization, and that's also a cognitive distortion. But flipping to the other side of the coin and just blaming everyone else and not taking personal responsibility is also a very toxic way of thinking. Now, I would like to tell you about something I call the Bob rule. I can't remember where I heard about the Bob rule, but it's important to consider. If you begin to feel like your life stinks because of all these other people out here, the Bob rule just might apply to you. Okay. Or if you meet someone who seems to think that everything is everyone else's fault, you might want to share with them the Bob rule. And here's the Bob rule. If Bob has a problem with everyone else, the problem is probably Bob. This is a great rule for you to remember, ladies, if you are out there dating. If you meet a guy and every ex that he ever had was toxic, every girl he ever dated was crazy, you might want to share with him the Bob rule, and you might want to not go out with him again. Okay? So this cognitive distortion of blaming is basically a refusal of taking personal responsibility. And now we're moving on to number 13, the control fallacy. That's when you believe that life is completely outside your control and you have no control, like saying to yourself, well, there's just no way I'm ever going to get out of poverty. Like, there's just nothing I could do at this point, okay? Or you could take excessive control. Believing that you actually control things that you don't. You see this a lot in certain religious movements where people actually believe, well, if I just think a certain way, I can control every single circumstance and situation in my life. And where it comes most, let me rephrase that, where we most often see this is people taking responsibility for controlling and making other people happy. You know, trying to control your children by manipulation, or your spouse, or believing that it's your personal responsibility to make someone else happy. So if my husband, my kids, my best friend, my boss is miserable and unhappy, it's my fault because I'm supposed to be able to control this. Okay. So that's called the control fallacy. And then next, the fallacy of fairness. This is believing that life is supposed to be fair. Now, this one bothers me because I really want life to be fair. I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to be at peace. That's why I do what I do. That's why I make these videos, because I want every one of you to overcome anxiety and be at peace. But the truth is, life isn't always fair. And I've seen that in my own life. When I was pregnant with my first child, I had literally 6 or 7 friends. We were all pregnant at once. It was so awesome. I thought, wow, we're going to have these play groups. Everything is going to be wonderful. And I got slammed. My child was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and she only lived 15 days old. So now here I am, you know, what's supposed to be a new mom, and here I am by myself. My nursery is empty. All my friends are changing diapers. They're going to the park. They're having play groups, and then there's me. That was so unfair. It wasn't fair. I didn't do anything to deserve that, but yet it happened. And so if we expect life to be fair and we're filled with resentment because it's not, we're going to suffer. Now, of course, I grieved, and it's natural to grieve when things don't work out. So please don't think I'm being critical. I've been through that grief process myself, but we really have to accept the fact that there is no rule. Life just isn't fair. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Life still isn't fair. Life involves suffering, and we have to meet that suffering and overcome it. Fallacy number 15, always being right. Okay, I've met people like that, and I know you have too, that they just believe they're right about everything. They're just right about everything. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you present to the contrary, they're still right. And them being right is more important than the relationship that you have. So they will sacrifice a relationship to be right, okay? So just ask yourself if maybe you fall into this category, and we're not going to think black and white here. Sometimes we might do that, and other times we might not, because we're all vulnerable of falling into these cognitive distortions from time to time. And number 16, the fallacy of change. That's believing that people or situations must change in order for me to be happy. This is a really big one, folks. I meet so many clients who believe this. I simply cannot be happy, and I cannot be expected to be happy unless something changes. And someone like that is going to say something like, well, it's just not possible for me to be happy unless I get married. I can't be happy when I'm single. Or I can't be happy unless I overcome this illness. I can't be happy unless I get the job I want or move to the country I want to move to. Now, the proof that that's not true is the fact that there are other people with disabilities who are happy. There are single people who are happy. There are people in a job that you couldn't even imagine doing on a day-to-day basis who are happy. And the reason is because of the way they think. Their perspective on their situations and circumstances is different than how you think about it. And the good news is our thinking can always change. If we can't shift externally, we can make internal changes to meet the challenges that we face. And we've gotten to the last one, denial. Okay, this is just a refusal to face the truth. Okay, maybe your life is literally falling apart. You've lost relationships, you've lost jobs, you've had terrible situations, circumstances come into your life because of an addiction, because of your drinking or drug use, and yet you keep saying to yourself, well, I'm not an alcoholic or I'm not an addict. I just like to party. Okay. So that's an example of denial, as well as you can deny what's happening to you. Like, well, I know my marriage has been rough, but Bob promised that he would never hit me again. And yet he's made that promise 10 times before, and he always returns to his abuse, and you're just refusing to face it. So this is another cognitive distortion that we can fall into. Now, this is not the end. There are more cognitive distortions, but I just wanted to hit on the main ones because this video is already long enough. But I have good news for you. If you have checked a lot of boxes and now you're concerned, you're thinking, oh no, I have so many of these, Tiffani, now what do I do? I am going to create for you a meditation to help shift these cognitive distortions to a more empowered way of thinking within your mind. So I want you to stay tuned so that you can participate in that meditation. Now, please like and share this video and subscribe to my channel so you make sure you don't miss any videos. I want to talk to you about how to use this meditation I'll be creating. Remember, new thought patterns and behaviors are not wired into your brain in a split second. Okay, that just doesn't happen. It'd be great if it were true, but it takes some time. Luckily, it doesn't take years. It doesn't even take months. You can create new neural connections for new thought patterns and behaviors in as little as 21 to 30 days. So this meditation I'm creating for you on overcoming these cognitive distortions, I want you to make sure you listen to it every day. It's always best to listen to these meditations at night when you're going to sleep. Now, some people worry, Tiffani, what if I fall asleep? It's okay. Because if you're anything like me, when you listen to a meditation, you're trying to focus on it. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about, what am I going to cook for dinner tomorrow? Or did I buy those concert tickets? Or what am I going to do about my child's problem? And you find yourself constantly having to refocus, okay? That refocusing is good practice for training your brain, but it does hinder how much good stuff is getting into the subconscious mind. But when you fall asleep to something you're listening to, your conscious mind is going offline and it's pouring right into your subconscious. So I encourage you to be looking for that meditation on cognitive distortions and play it each night for 21 to 30 days. I do recommend 30 because some people absorb information a little slower than others. And watch your mindset change. Watch as you notice that you're less prone to these cognitive distortions. So thank you for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.